Imagine you and 10 strangers are stuck on an island. No rules, no leader, no agreement on anything. What happens? At first, maybe nothing. Everyone is polite, everyone is careful, but then someone takes more than their share of food. Someone builds their shelter where another person wanted to build theirs. Someone stronger starts making decisions for everyone else. Now scale that up. Not 10 people, 350 million, hundreds of languages, dozens of religions, centuries of colonial rule ending overnight, hundreds of princely states that were technically separate kingdoms, now suddenly asked to be one country. That was India, August 15th, 1947, independent, free, and completely without a rule book. What is a constitution really? The word sounds heavy, official, like something that lives in a glass case in a museum. But strip it down, and a constitution is actually a very simple idea. It is a written agreement between a government and its people. It answers 3 questions. What is this country? How will it be run? And what can the government never do to you? That third one is the most important and the most ignored. A constitution doesn't just give the government its powers, it limits them. It draws a line and says, beyond this line, you cannot go. Not even if you win an election, not even if a majority wants it, not even if the Prime Minister himself signs the order. Think of it this way. The government is like a very powerful employee, and the Constitution is the employment contract. It tells the employee what they are hired to do and what they are absolutely not allowed to do. Most of us have never read that contract. This channel exists to change that. This idea is older than you think. Humans have always needed rules to live together. Even before paper, before ink, communities had agreements, oral laws, codes of conduct, tribal rules that everyone understood. The earliest written legal code we know of is the Code of Hammurabi, Babylon, 1754 BC. Nearly 4,000 years ago, a king carved his laws onto a stone pillar so everyone could read them. But those were the king's rules, not rules about the king. The real shift, the idea that even a ruler must follow rules, that came much later. 1215, England. A group of powerful noblemen were fed up with their king. King John kept taxing them without asking, throwing people in prison without reason, doing whatever he wanted. So they forced him to sign a document. The Magna Carta, Great Charter. It said, even the king is not above the law. That was the seed. It took another 500 years to become a tree. 1787. The United States of America, a brand new country, just freed from British rule, sat down and wrote something the world had never quite seen before. A full constitution for a democratic republic, with a Bill of Rights, with checks on every branch of government. It was radical. It was imperfect. It originally protected slavery. Let's be honest about that. But the structure of the idea, a written social contract for a free people that spread across the world. France followed, then Latin America, then country after country through the 19th and 20th centuries. By the time World War II ended in 1945, and country after country began breaking free from colonial rule. Writing a constitution was the first act of becoming a nation. India was next. India's story. Here is something most of us were never told in school. India's constitution was not written after independence. It was written during the independence movement itself. The Constituent Assembly, the group of people who would write the Constitution, was formed in December 1946, 8 months before we even became free. Think about what that moment was. The British were still here. Partition was happening. And in the middle of all this uncertainty, 299 people sat down in a room and started asking a much harder question than, how do we get the British out? They asked, what kind of country do we want to be? The work began with a man named B.N. Rao, Sir Benegal Narsingh Rao, a brilliant civil servant who was appointed constitutional advisor to the Assembly. He traveled across the world, studied dozens of constitutions, and prepared the very first draft of what India's constitution could look like. That first draft was then handed to the drafting committee. The drafting committee was chaired by B.R. Ambedkar, a legal scholar of extraordinary depth. His job was to take the ideas the full assembly was debating and turn them into precise, enforceable legal language. It is meticulous, thankless work, getting the words exactly right so they cannot be misused. So they protect the people they are meant to protect. So they hold up in a court of law decades later. Ambedkar did that work with remarkable care. The full assembly debated for 2 years, 11 months, and 18 days. They studied constitutions from more than 60 countries: the American Constitution, the British parliamentary model, Irish directive principles, Canadian federalism, the French Republic, the Weimar Constitution of Germany. They were not copying. They were learning and then making something suited to India's specific complexity. Over 2,000 amendments were proposed and debated. The final document was the longest written constitution of any nation in the world. 395 articles, 8 schedules, over 145,000 words. And here is a detail that still astonishes me. Every single page of the original Constitution was handwritten and hand-illustrated by artists. There is not one typewritten page in the original. At a time when they could have simply printed it, they chose to make it something that looked like it mattered. Because it did. On November 26, 1949, the Constituent Assembly formally adopted the Constitution. They signed it. It was done. But it didn't come into force immediately. On January 26, 1950, the Constitution was switched on. India officially became a republic. And the reason they chose January 26th, specifically, it was not random. January 26th, 1930, was the date the Indian National Congress had declared Purna Swaraj, complete self-rule, as India's goal. The founders chose the same date 20 years later to mark the moment that goal was finally real. That is why Republic Day is not just a parade. It is the anniversary of the day we, the people, gave ourselves a promise. So, what is a constitution? It is a written agreement between a government and its people. It says, here is how this country works. Here is who has power. Here is how that power can be used. And here, very clearly, is how it cannot. India's constitution was built by people who had just lived through colonial rule, who knew what it felt like to have no rights, no recourse, no protection from the state. They were determined that the country they were building would be different. The document they created has protected journalists, farmers, prisoners, students, minorities, and ordinary citizens in courts across this country for 75 years. Most of us have never read it. That is what this channel is here to change. In the next episode, we go to the very beginning of the Constitution, the preamble, 85 words, written and rewritten until they were exactly right. Justice, liberty, equality, fraternity. What do these words actually mean? How were they chosen? And are we living up to them? That is next. We, the people,